Hello, this is Mrs. Forbes again. Today we are going to be doing the reading for assignment number 4. You will find assignment number 4 in your assignment packet. But if you look at assignment number 4, there are actually 3 different readings that you're going to do. We are only going to read one together in this video. 2 of them are poems, and we will have enough time to read these poems together in class. So the poems are New Colossus and Legal Alien, but we'll read those together in class. But that doesn't mean you can't read them on your own, which might be a good idea to be prepared. But the reading we are going to do together is this one, From When I Was Puerto Rican by Esmeralda Santiago. And you will find this reading in the additional reading packet that was given to you. So it says additional readings for assignment 4, English 1A. What happened was these readings were supposed to be added to your assignment packet booklet, but instead they were forgotten. So we have this additional packet for you. So please make sure you have this. If you don't have this packet, please let me know as soon as you can so I can get you this reading packet. But you will see that it shows the New Colossus, Legal Alien, and then it has the third reading. This third reading is the one that we are going to be focusing on and annotating for class. This is also the reading that you will have your quiz on when you start class next week. So the title is From When I Was Puerto Rican. Please make sure you have your copy of this story in front of you so you can follow along while I read, and you can make the annotations that I make. This is a memoir, so that means that this author is writing a story about something that happened to her in her life. So the author is Esmeralda Santiago. Author, essayist, and screenwriter Esmeralda Santiago was born in 1948. She grew up as the oldest of 11 siblings. When she was 13, her family moved to New York City from Puerto Rico, and her mother supported the family on her own. Santiago went on to attend Harvard University and later founded an award-winning film and media production company. Background: the High School of Performing Arts in New York City, now the Fiorello H. LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts, was the first public school in the nation for students with unique performing arts talents. It served as the inspiration for the 1980 movie Fame and its 2009 remake. Auditions for acceptance into the school are highly competitive and rigorous. Another thing I wanted to share with you is Puerto Rico is an annexed island off the coast of the United States. And what that means is where it's not a state of the United States, Puerto Rico is considered an American, I guess, colony. And we support Puerto Rico, and the citizens of Puerto Rico are also American citizens. So even though they speak Spanish in Puerto Rico, if someone were to move from Puerto Rico to America, they are not considered an immigrant because they are still an American citizen if they live in Puerto Rico. But she still had difficulty in New York because she spoke Spanish, and she lived in a household with a lot of siblings, and her family moved to New York City, where she wasn't familiar with the landscape and with the way things were run, and it was very different from Puerto Rico, which was a small island surrounded by ocean, where everyone kind of knows everyone else, and there's a lot of green space, a lot of trees, not like a really big city like New York City. So we're going to learn about her story. I'm not going to stop too many times while I'm reading this, but I will stop a few times to tell you some important points. While Francisco was still alive, we had moved to Ellery Street. That meant I had to change schools, so Mammy walked me to PS 33, where I would attend ninth grade. The first week I was there, I was given a series of tests that showed that even though I couldn't speak English very well, I read and wrote it at the 10th grade level. So they put me in 9-3 with the smart kids. So I just want to tell you that in New York City, they have a whole lot of public schools. So each one is called public school, so PS, and then they're given a number. So this is the name of her school, Public School 33. Not very imaginative. One morning, Mr. Barone, a guidance counselor, called me to his office. He was short, with a big head and large hazel eyes under shapely eyebrows. His nose was long and round at the tip. He dressed in browns and yellows and often perched his tortoise-shell glasses on his forehead, as if he had another set of eyes up there. So, he pushed his glasses up, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know. He shuffled through some papers. Let's see here. You're 14, is that right? Yes, sir. And you've never thought about what you want to be? When I was very young, I wanted to be a Ivara. When I was older, I wanted to be a cartographer, then a topographer. But since we'd come to Brooklyn, I'd not thought about the future much. No, sir. He pulled his glasses down to where they belonged and shuffled through the papers again. Do you have any hobbies? I didn't know what he meant. Hobbies, hobbies. He flailed his hands as if he were juggling. Things you like to do after school. Yes. I tried to imagine what I did at home that might qualify as a hobby. I like to read. He seemed disappointed. Yes, we know about that. We know that about you. He pulled out a paper and stared at it. One of the tests we gave you was an aptitude test. It tells us what kinds of things you might be good at. The tests show that you would be good at helping people. Do you like to help people? I was afraid to contradict the test. Yes, sir? There's a high school we can send you where you can study biology and chemistry, which will prepare you for a career in nursing. I screwed up my face. He consulted the papers again. You would also do well in communications, teaching maybe. I remembered Miss Brown standing in front of a classroom full of rowdy teenagers, some of them taller than she was. I don't like to teach. Mr. Barone pushed his glasses up again and leaned over the stack of papers on his desk. Why don't you think about it and get back to me, he said, closing the folder with my name across the top. He put his hand flat on it, as if squeezing something out. You're a smart girl, Esmeralda. Let's try to get you into an academic school so that you have a shot at college. On the way home, I walked with another new ninth grader, Yolanda. She had been in New York for 3 years but knew as little English as I did. We spoke in Spanglish, a combination of English and Spanish, in which we hopped from one language to the other depending on which word came first. So before we turn the page, let's underline where it says, you're a smart girl, Esmeralda. Let's try to get you into an academic school so that you have a shot at college. So for the kids at this school, in the high school that she attended really mattered. And if you did not go to a good academic high school, then you really didn't have a shot of attending college. So her counselor knew she was smart and wanted her to have a chance to attend college. And then we also have here that they spoke in Spanglish. So you could probably guess what Spanglish is. It's a combination of the word Spanish and the word English. So it's like English and Spanish mixed together. Now they're going to be speaking in Spanglish, and I just want to warn you, I'm horrible at Spanish. So if you know Spanish and I say something inappropriate or rude, I apologize in advance because I don't speak Spanish very well. And sometimes I have said bad words when I didn't mean to. So I apologize. Now I think you're hoping I said that word. Okay. Oh gosh. Te pregunto Mr. Barone, el que quieres hacer when you grow up? I asked. Se pero? I didn't know. ¿Y tú? Yo tampoco. He said que I like to help people. Pero, mi no me gusta mucho la gente. When she heard me say I didn't like people much, Yolanda looked at me from the corner of her eye, waiting to become the exception. By the time I said it, she had dashed up the stairs of her building. She didn't wave as she ducked in, and the next day she wasn't friendly. I walked around the rest of the day in embarrassed isolation, knowing that somehow I'd given myself away to the only friend I'd made at junior high school 33. I had to either take back my words or live with the consequences of stating that was becoming the truth. I never said that to anyone, not even to myself. It was an added weight, but I wasn't about to trade it for companionship. So she just saying she really didn't like people that much. She was kind of an introvert. A few days later, Mr. Brown called me back to his office. Well, tiny green flecks burned around the black pupils of his hazel eyes. The night before, Mammy had called us into the living room. On the television, 50 of America's most beautiful girls paraded in ruffled tulle dresses before a tinsel waterfall. Okay, so what they're talking about here is like the Miss America contest. It's a beauty contest where women dress up in pretty dresses and bathing suits, and they get judged on their beauty, and then the winner gets a scholarship for school. So paragraph 29. Aren't they lovely? Mammy murmured as the girls, escorted by boys in uniform, floated by the camera, twirled and disappeared behind a screen to the strains of a waltz and an announcer's dramatic voice calling their names, ages, and states. Mammy sat mesmerized through the whole pageant. I'd like to be a model, I said to Mr. Brown. He stared at me, pulled his glasses down from his forehead, looked at the papers inside the folder with my name on it, and glared. A model? Sorry, let me change my voice. A model? His voice was gruff, as if he were more comfortable yelling at people than talking to them. I want to be on television. Oh, then you want to be an actress, in a tone that said this was only a slight improvement over my first career choice. We stared at one another for a few seconds. He pushed his glasses up to his forehead again and reached for a book on the shelf in back of him. I only know one school that trains actresses, but we've never sent them a student from here. Performing arts, the write-up said, was an academic as opposed to a vocational public school that trains students wishing to pursue a career in theater, music, and dance. It says here that you have to audition. He stood up and held the book closer to the faint gray light coming through the narrow window high on his wall. Have you ever performed in front of an audience? I was announcer in my school show in Puerto Rico, I said, and I recite poetry. There, not here. He closed the book and held it against his chest. His right index finger thumped a rhythm on his lower lip. Let me call them and find out exactly what you need to do. Then we can talk some more. I left his office strangely happy, confident that something good had just happened, not knowing exactly what. I'm not afraid, I'm not afraid, I'm not afraid. Every day I walked home from school repeating those words. The broad streets and sidewalks that had impressed me so on the first day we had arrived had become as familiar as the dirt road from Macun to the highway. Only my curiosity about the people who lived behind these walls ended where the facades of the buildings opened into dark hallways or locked doors. Nothing good, I imagined, could be happening inside if so many locks had to be breached to go in or step out. It was on these tense walks home from school that I decided I had to get out of Brooklyn. Mammy had chosen this as our home, and just like every other time we'd move, I had to go along with her because I was a child who had no choice. But I wasn't willing to go along with her on this one. So let's underline where it says that she had to move with her mom, and then also that she decided she had to get out of Brooklyn. So Brooklyn is just kind of like a poor suburb of New York. It's still very much like city-like living with lots of concrete, lots of buildings that are tall and very close together. And it's not very pretty. There's not many trees, not many open areas, not many parks, just lots of buildings. And she decided she had to get out of Brooklyn. How can people live like this? I shrieked once, desperate to run across the field, to feel grass under my feet instead of pavement. Like what? Mammy asked, looking around our apartment, the kitchen and living room crisscrossed with sagging lines of drying diapers and bedclothes. Everyone on top of each other. No room to do anything. No air. Do you want to go back to Macun to live like savages with no electricity, no toilets? At least you could step outside every day without somebody trying to kill you. Ay, Neggies, stop exaggerating. I hate my life, I yelled. Then do something about it, she yelled back. Until Mr. Brown showed me the listing for Performing Arts High School, I hadn't known what to do. So let's underline these parts where she says, I hate my life. And then her mom says, well, then do something about it. Kind of shows that we're all in charge of our own destinies, our own futures. The auditions are in less than a month. You have to learn a monologue, which you will perform in front of a panel. If you do well and your grades here are good, you might get into the school. Mr. Barone took charge of preparing me for my audition to performing arts. He selected a speech from The Silver Cord, a play by Sidney Howard, first performed in 1926, but whose action took place in a New York drawing room circa 1905. Mr. Gaddy, the English teacher, Mr. Gaddy, the English teacher, he said, will coach you. And Mrs. Johnson will talk to you about what to wear and things like that. I was to play Christina, a young married woman confronting her mother-in-law, learning the monologue phonetically from Mr. Gaddy. It opened with, you belong to a type that's very common in this country, Mr. Phelps, a type of self-centered, self-pitying, sun-devouring tigress with unmentionable proclivities suppressed on the side. We don't have time to study the meaning of every word, Mr. Gaddy said. Just make sure you pronounce every word correctly. Mrs. Johnson, who taught home economics, called me to her office. Is that how you enter a room? She asked the minute I came in. Try again. Only this time don't barge in. Step in slowly, head up, back straight, a nice smile on your face. That's it. I took a deep breath and waited. Now sit. No, not like that. Don't just plop down. Float down to the chair with your knees together. She demonstrated and I copied her. That's better. What do you do with your hands? Oh no, don't hold your chin like that. It's not ladylike. Put your hands on your lap and leave them there. Don't use them so much when you talk. I sat stiff as a cutout while Mrs. Johnson and Mr. Brown asked me questions they thought the panel at Performing Arts would ask. Where are you from? Puerto Rico. No, Mrs. Johnson said. Puerto Rico. Keep your R's soft. Try again. Do you have any hobbies? Mr. Brown asked. Now I knew what to answer. I enjoy dancing and the movies. Why do you want to come to this school? Mrs. Johnson and Mr. Brown had worked on my answer if this question should come up. I would like to study at Performing Arts because of its academic program and so that I may be trained as an actress. Very good, very good. Mr. Brown rubbed his hands together, twinkled his eyes at Mrs. Johnson. I think we have a shot at this. Remember, Mrs. Johnson said, when you shop for your audition dress, look for something very simple in dark colors. Mammy bought me a red plaid wool jumper with a crisp white shirt, my first pair of stockings and penny loafers. The night before, she rolled up my hair in pink curlers that cut into my scalp and made it hard to sleep. For the occasion, I was allowed to wear eye makeup and a little lipstick. You look so grown up, Mammy said, her voice sad but happy, as I twirled in front of her and Tata. Toda una señorita, Tata said, her eyes misty. We set out for the audition on an overcast January morning, heavy with the threat of snow. Why couldn't you choose a school close to home? Mammy grumbled as we got on the train to Manhattan. I worried that even if I were accepted, she wouldn't let me go because it was so far from home, 1 hour each way by subway. But in spite of her complaints, she was proud that I was good enough to be considered for such a famous school. And she actually seemed excited that I would be leaving the neighborhood. So just let's write down or underline that this school was so far from home, 1 hour each way. Like, would you be willing to ride 1 hour to school and 1 hour home each day, Monday through Friday, go to a good school? You'll be exposed to a different class of people, she assured me, and I felt the force of her ambition without knowing exactly what she meant. 3 women sat behind a long table in the classroom where the desks and chairs had been pushed against the wall. As I entered, I held my head up and smiled and then floated down to the chair in front of them, clasped my hands on my lap, and smiled some more. Good morning, said the tall one with hair the color of sand. She was big-boned and solid, with intense blue eyes, a generous mouth, and soothing hands with short fingernails. She was dressed in shades of beige from head to toe and wore no makeup and no jewelry, except for the gold chain that held her glasses just above her bosom. Her voice was rich, modulated, each word pronounced as if she were inventing it. Next to her sat a very small woman with very high heels. Her cropped hair was poofed around her face, with bangs brushing the tips of her long false lashes. Her huge dark brown eyes were thickly lined and black all around, and her small mouth was carefully drawn in and painted cerise. Her suntanned face turned toward me with the innocent curiosity of a lively baby. She was dressed in black, with many gold chains around her neck, big earrings, several bracelets, and large stone rings on the fingers of both hands. The third woman was tall, small-boned, thin, but shapely. Her dark hair was pulled flat against her skull into a knot in back of her head. Her face was all angles and light, with fawn-like dark brown eyes and straight nose, full lips painted just a shade pinker than their normal natural color. Silky forest green cuffs peeked out from the sleeves of her burgundy suit. Diamond studs winked from perfect earlobes. I had dreamed of this moment for several weeks. More than anything, I wanted to impress the panel with my talent so that I would be accepted into performing arts and leave Brooklyn every day. And I hoped one day I would never go back. So let's go ahead and underline this. This is the character's motivation, what the character wants, what motivates the character to do what she does. I'm going to move this all the way to the top. We're on page 7. But the moment I faced these 3 impeccably groomed women, I forgot my English and Mrs. Johnson's lessons on how to behave like a lady. In the agony of trying to answer their barely comprehensible questions, I jabbed my hands here and there, forming words with my fingers because the words refused to leave my mouth. "Why don't you let us hear your monologue now?" the woman with the dangling glasses asked softly. I stood up abruptly and my chair clattered onto its side, 2 feet from where I stood. I picked it up, wishing with all my strength that a thunderbolt would strike me dead to ashes on the spot. So she's really embarrassed right now. "It's all right," she said. "Take a breath. We know you are nervous." I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, walked to the middle of the room, and began my monologue. "You belong to a type that's very common in this country, Mrs. Phelps, a type of self-centered, self-pity, insane, boring tigress with immense and ball proclivities on the side." In spite of Mr. Gaddy's reminders that I should speak slowly and enunciate every word, even if I didn't understand it, I recited my 3-minute monologue in 1 minute flat. The small women's long lashes seemed to have grown with amazement. The elegant woman's serene face twitched with controlled laughter. The tall one, dressed in beige, smiled sweetly. "Thank you, dear," she said. "Could you wait outside for a few moments?" I resisted the urge to curtsy. The long hallway had narrow wainscoting halfway up to this high ceiling. Single bulb lamps hung from long cords, creating yellow puddles of light on the polished brown linoleum tile. A couple of girls my age sat on straight chairs next to their mothers, waiting their turn. They looked up as I came out of the door and shut the door behind me. Mammy stood up from her chair at the end of the hall. She looked as scared as I felt. "What happened?" "Nothing," I mumbled, afraid that if I began telling her about it, I would break into tears in front of the other people, whose eyes followed me and Mammy as we walked to the exit sign. "I have to wait here a minute." "Did they say anything?" "No, I'm just supposed to wait." We leaned against the wall. Across from us, there was a bulletin board with newspaper clippings about former students. On the ragged edge, a neat person had printed in blue ink, PA, Performing Arts, and the year the actor, dancer, or musician had graduated. I closed my eyes and tried to picture myself on that bulletin board with PA 66 across the top. The door at the end of the hall opened and the woman in beige poked her head out. "Esmeralda, here." I raised my hand. She led me into the room. There was another girl in there whom she introduced as Bonnie, a junior at the school. Do you know what a pantomime is? The woman asked. I nodded. You and Bonnie are sisters decorating a Christmas tree. Bonnie looked a lot like Juanita Marin, whom I had last seen in Cancun 4 years earlier. We decided where the invisible Christmas tree would be, and we sat on the floor and pretended we were taking decorations out of boxes and hanging them on the branches. My family had never had a Christmas tree, but I remembered how once I had helped Papi wine-colored lights around the eggplant bush that divided our land from Dona Ana's. We started at the bottom and wound the wire with tiny red bulbs around and around until we ran out. Then Pappy plugged another cord to it, and we kept going until the branches hung heavy with light and the bush looked like it was on fire. Before long, I had forgotten where I was and that the tree didn't exist and Bonnie was not my sister. She pretended to hand me a very delicate ball, and just before I took it, she made like it fell to the ground and shattered. I was petrified that Mammy would come in and yell at us for breaking her favorite decoration. Just as I began to pick up the tiny fragments of non-existent crystal, a voice broke in. Thank you. Bonnie got up, smiled, and went out. The elegant woman stretched her hand out for me to shake. We will notify your school in a few weeks. It was very nice to meet you. I shook hands all around, then backed out of the room in a fog, silent, as if the pantomime had taken my voice and the urge to speak. So a pantomime is where you mime, you act out a scene. You're like, I'm stuck in a box. That would be a pantomime. On the way home, Mammy kept asking what had happened, and I kept mumbling, nothing happened. Ashamed that after all the hours of practice with Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Gaddy, after the expense of new clothes and shoes, after Mammy had to take a day off from work to take me into Manhattan, after all that, I had failed the audition and would never, ever get out of Brooklyn. Now, epilogue says, after this event, we get to see what happened. El mismo Ibaro con diferente cabello. Same Yibaro, different horse. So what this means is same place, different horse, or same countryside, different horse. So she's saying that I'm still navigating through this new world, but now I have a different horse to ride. A decade after my graduation from performing arts. So what is that? A decade after my graduation from performing arts? So she got into the school. So that means she graduated from that high school she auditioned for. I visited the school. A decade is 10 years. So 10 years after she graduated, she visited the school. I was by then living in Boston, a scholarship student at Harvard University. The tall, elegant woman of my audition had become my mentor through my 3 years there. Since my graduation, she had married the school principal. I remember your audition, she said, her chiseled face dreamy, her lips toying with a smile that she seemed still to have to control. I had forgotten the skinny brown girl with the curled hair, wool jumper, and lively hands, but she hadn't. She told me that the panel had to ask me to leave so that they could laugh because it was so funny to see a 14-year-old Puerto Rican girl jabbering about a monologue about a possessive mother-in-law at the turn of the century. The words incomprehensible because they went by so fast. We admired, she said, the courage it took to stand in front of us and do what you did. So you mean I didn't get into the school because of my talent, but because I had chutzpah? Chutzpah means confidence. We both laughed. Are any of your sisters and brothers in college? No, I'm the only one so far. How many of you are there? By the time I graduated from high school, there were 11 of us. 11? She looked at me for a long time until I had to look down. Do you ever think about how far you've come? She asked. No, I answered. I never stopped to think about it. I might jinx the momentum. Let me tell you another story then, she said. The first day of your first year, you were absent. We called your house. You said you couldn't come to school because you had nothing to wear. I wasn't sure if you were joking. I asked to speak to your mother, and you translated what she had said. She needed you to go somewhere with her to interpret. At first, you wouldn't tell me where, but then you admitted you were going to the welfare office. You were crying, and I had to assure you that you were not the only student in this school whose family received public assistance. The next day, you were here, bright and eager. And now, here you are, about to graduate from Harvard. I'm glad you made that phone call, I said, and I'm glad you came to see me. But right now, I have to teach a class. She stood up, as graceful as I remembered. Take care. Her warm embrace, fragrant of expensive perfume, took me by surprise. Thank you, I said as she went around the corner to her classroom. I walked the halls of the school, looking for the room where my life had changed. It was across from the science lab, a few doors down from the big bulletin board, where someone with neat handwriting still wrote the letters PA, followed by the graduating year along the edges of newspaper clippings featuring famous alumni. PA 66, I said to no one in particular, one of these days. Okay, so let's underline where it says I walked the halls of the school looking for a room where my life had changed. So the author's life changed when she was accepted to a PA school. So PA means, performing arts. Now, if I went too fast, go ahead and pause it, but I'm going to move to the top. I want you to also see where it says, so you mean I didn't get into the school because of my talent, but because I had chutzpah? Go ahead and circle that and put courage. So write down that she was given a chance to succeed. She probably wasn't the best person to perform a monologue, but it was her courage and the fact that she was Puerto Rican and she had different circumstances than many of the other students that she was given a chance to succeed. So that's it for today. It's a long reading, so I'm going to stop it now.